bipartisan priority in Congress. It's always been that way. And it continues to be that way. Your continued activism and involvement here today to strengthen the U.S.-Israel relationship truly does make a difference. As the whip, I know how important it is that you're meeting with every member of Congress with a unified message. That's what it takes for us to put the votes together to pass legislation, and especially the legislation we work on together that is so incredibly bipartisan. Your message resonates with us on Capitol Hill, and it'll be heard all around the country and the world. Your leadership has helped advance the bipartisan achievements that strengthen our alliance with Israel. These efforts have shown American leadership at home and on the international stage to stand by Israel and crack down on those seeking to delegitimize or destroy Israel. Unfortunately, Israel remains on the front line to terror. Challenge to Israel's sovereignty cannot be tolerated, and we must continue to stand together in support of Israel's right to defend herself from all threats. In Congress, we're going to do our part. We're going to provide the crucial security assistance through fully funding the $3.1 billion in the Memorandum of Understanding and the $705 million for Israeli missile defense, a vital system that protects Israel. While we provide the critical security and assistance, we cannot overlook the economic and political fights, whether on campuses or at the United Nations. I'm glad we have such strong leadership at the UN with our ambassador, Nikki Haley, and what she's doing. And what she's doing to stand up to the BDS movement and to stand by Israel and continue to work to counter the growing challenges that we face around the world. We must also continue to use all of our tools available to cut off Iran's support for its proxies and stop their ballistic missile program. In the House, we've passed legislation to impose sanctions to cut off Hezbollah's resources and on Iran for its ballistic missile program. These are key steps to counter Iran's destructive actions that undermine regional peace and security. President Trump also outlined a comprehensive strategy to curtail Iran's dangerous nuclear ambitions, and I fully support his administration's work to fix this flawed and broken nuclear deal so we can end Iran's nuclear program once and for all. President Trump has also followed through on what most politicians have simply talked about for years by fulfilling his promise to move the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem. Congress has long maintained that Jerusalem is the capital of Israel, and I applaud President Trump for once again demonstrating strong leadership on the world stage in support of our strongest ally in the Middle East. I'm glad. And look, I've been to Israel a number of times, and when you go to Jerusalem and you walk the streets, as a Catholic, I feel so warm and embraced by the people of Jerusalem to be able to share and experience such an important part of my faith in a Jewish state, and that needs to continue. I'm glad that when it comes to Israel and maintaining our strong alliance, that we have bipartisan support in Congress for the work that we do. Much of our united front is a result of your hard work and constant advocacy to make sure that not only do you deliver the message, but you work with both sides of the aisle so that when we bring legislation to the floor, it truly is bipartisan. And that sends an important message to the rest of the world that America is united. Maybe there are areas where we're divided, so I hear, but when it comes to our strong support for Israel, we come together as a united Congress, Republican and Democrat, to express our support for the policies that are so important. While sometimes we face these challenges that seem worse than they were before, I know that our faith in America's greatness and steadfast commitment to stand by Israel will endure and prevail over the threats that we may face. Now, I want to share a personal story. As many of you know, on June 14th, I was shot last year. And it was a horrific day in many ways, but it was also a day and then a period of time where I saw the greatness of people all around the country. So many of you that prayed for me. I want to personally thank all of you for the prayers. They truly lifted me up during incredibly tough times. Thank you for those prayers and the heartfelt wishes. I should probably just leave when I get a standing ovation, but I want to share something else with you, a personal story about the great leader of Israel, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who's going to be addressing you later today. I've met Prime Minister Netanyahu many times. We're going to meet later today when the Prime Minister meets with our congressional leadership, Republican and Democrat. But I've also met him a number of times every time I go to Jerusalem. It's amazing when you go to Israel and you go as a congressional delegation with members of Congress. It might be 3 members of Congress. It might be 25 members of Congress. When Eric Cantor first brought me when I was a freshman member of Congress just 9 years ago. But the Prime Minister always makes it a priority to sit down with members of Congress of both parties and share the issues and the experiences. You know, when I got to go out and see the Iron Dome personally, it truly does make a difference. But after I was shot, on the day I was shot, we get a call from Prime Minister Netanyahu. Now, I was out of it for 3 days. I didn't come to after I had surgeries, fighting for my life, infections, and finally, by day 3, I woke up. And my wife was there, my family was there. They started sharing some of the stories of the people that were praying all around the world. And one of the things that stood out, they said, Prime Minister Netanyahu called for you. And I said, Prime Minister Netanyahu called for me. I know he's busy. There's so many threats and problems that he's dealing with. And they said, he wants you to call him when you're able to. So finally, about another day went by, and the fog had kind of lifted. And I said, okay, I'd love to talk to him. And so we arranged the call, and we spent just a wonderful conversation on the phone. And he shared with me some of his personal experiences. You all know his brother died in a shooting and in his service to the military. But he also shared some other personal stories with me. And it was just such a warm expression of the kind of person he is. The fact that he called told me a number of things about him, but it also said something about our relationship. Why would he call a member of the United States Congress who had been shot when he's the Prime Minister of Israel? You know why? Because our countries love each other. Our countries care about each other. This is a relationship that's built on this kind of love and respect for what we do. What you do is so important to maintaining it. Let's continue to do this great work to stand up for the Jewish state of Israel. Thank you for your advocacy. Have a great day on the Hill. Love being with you.
Welcome Ranking Member of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, Senator Robert Menendez.
Good morning, AIPAC, and thank you for that warm welcome. I'm honored to be here once again at the Policy Conference. Let me take a moment of personal privilege to say that sometimes God puts a Goliath in your path to find the David within you. And I found that David within me. But we all know that even David had a slingshot, and many of you here today were part of my slingshot, so I am very grateful and thankful. It's no secret that I have taken a lot of heat over the years for standing up for what I believe in. But when my children asked me if I knew what was going to happen, would I have taken those same stands? And my answer is a resolute yes, absolutely. Standing here, I'm inspired by all of you, the thousands of AIPAC members who dedicate your time and energy to support America's everlasting bond with Israel. And I'm proud to see that once again we have hundreds of AIPAC members here from the great state of New Jersey. And that includes my dear friend and AIPAC's newest president, Dr. Mort Friedman. As I'm sure many of you know, and if not, you'll get to understand, Mort is a real mensch, a stalwart advocate for Israel, and a tenacious leader who will continue to serve AIPAC well. Mort, congratulations. As we celebrate his success, I also want to take a moment to celebrate the life and legacy of a New Jerseyan who is no longer with us, Lonnie Kaplan. He was a true friend, a champion for this community, and a fierce advocate for truth and justice. To all those here who feel his absence, may his memory, as they say, be a blessing. I see Lonnie's legacy as I look out into the ocean of people gathered here today, people of all ages, all faiths, and all political persuasions. Your commitment to our common cause, your presence, your visits, and your voices send a message across Washington to Jerusalem and throughout the world that the United States and Israel share an alliance that is unbreakable and ironclad. And I especially want to recognize the 3,600 students who made their way to Washington this year. It's important that you're here. In recent days, we have been reminded of the power that rests in the hands of America's youth. When young people stand up and speak out for what they believe in, the world cannot help but listen. So to the thousands of students who came to our nation's capital to participate in our democracy, I salute you. I thank you, and I ask everyone here to join me in applauding you for participating. Now, all of us come together clear-eyed and fully aware of the challenging times in which we live. We have seen anti-Semitism, white nationalism, and other insidious breeds of hatred on the rise from the streets of Charlottesville to the capitals of Europe. We have seen ever-increasing volatility in the Middle East and a refugee crisis unseen since World War II. And we have seen Iranian aggression throughout the region, propelling terrorist proxies ever closer to Israel's borders. And we confront these challenges together. And as we do so, I continue to be guided by my belief that it is in the national interest and security of the United States to have a strong, unwavering alliance with the state of Israel, the one true democracy in a sea of autocracy, a steadfast ally of the United States and a nation of incredible innovation and economic sway, and the country most likely to be voting with us in common cause in international forums. Now, most of you know that I have resumed my role as the ranking member of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, and I want to commend my friend, Senator Ben Cardin of Maryland, a strong friend of Israel and AIPAC, for his steadfast leadership. And in my renewed capacity, I will be a continuing champion for the values that we share. Much like the bond between the United States and Israel, I do not back away from my commitments. I do not waver in my beliefs, even when political winds change, even when it may be tough for others to stand up for Israel. I will always stand up for three fundamental truths. One, the security of the United States is strong when our bond with Israel is strong. Two, the Jewish people have a right to live in peace, security, and prosperity in the indisputable homeland of their ancestors. And three, Israel has a right to defend herself, and the United States will always ensure she has the capabilities necessary to protect herself and her borders. We know that Israel has always been surrounded by enemies, but today the stakes are higher, the risks are greater, the threats are more deadly and increasingly existential. For years, we have been talking about the threats Iran poses to Israel. We have heard the anti-Israel vitriol echoing out of Tehran. We have seen its proxies pushing closer and closer to Israel's borders. And we know exactly why Iran continues to expand into Syria and invest so much in prolonging Bashar al-Assad's brutal dictatorship. Iranian leaders transferring weapons to Hezbollah seek to build a land bridge from Tehran through Baghdad and Damascus to Beirut. Iran views the Syrian battlefield as a laboratory for training Iranian proxy forces devoted to a singular mission: Israel's destruction. And we know that Russia has helped enable Iran's expansion in Syria by prolonging Assad's grip on power. Hand in hand, criminal and terrorists, Putin and Assad have cleared a path for the Iranian regime to expand its military footprint. Make no mistake, Iran is building an advanced military presence in Syria, and we risk willfully disregarding this reality if we cling to a failed policy of negotiating with Russia. That's precisely what we are doing if we continue to seek out agreements to de-escalate areas in Syria. These agreements with Russia are dangerous. They are, in fact, paving the way for Iran to stay in Syria. That's why it's well past time for the President to recognize that in Syria, here at home or around the world, Russia is not a partner for stability or peace at the end of the day. Russia has made it clear that its made its alliances clear with the slaughter of civilians, dropping bombs on hospitals, on homes, on humanitarian aid convoys, working to care for people under siege. And Putin continues to exploit the migration crisis to sow discord throughout Western Europe and continue his campaign to undermine the post-World War II international order. The links between Moscow and Tehran and Damascus are crystal clear. Without American leadership, I fear that there will be no international response to the Russian-backed Iranian entrenchment in Syria. We saw it last month when Iran sent a drone into Israeli airspace, and the Assad regime turned its Russian-provided air defense system on an Israeli fighter jet. Of course, Israel responded with necessary and appropriate force in defending herself and her red lines, and we applaud the bravery and the precision conduct of the Israeli Defense Forces. We must be unequivocal in our support for our allies. We must assert our global leadership driven by our principles, our values, and security, and we cannot cede this leadership to our adversaries. And we must stop wasting time testing Russia's resolve on Iran. Indeed, President Putin is happy to keep the administration wringing its hands while Iran moves in next door to Israel. My friends, this situation is untenable, and it's absolutely unacceptable. As Iran grows its footprint in Syria and battle-hardened fighters return to Lebanon, we know that Lebanese Hezbollah continues to build new missile production facilities and advanced weapons plans to direct at Israel. In the face of this growing threat, it's no wonder why there's increasing talk in Israel of the next war. This is not a war that Israel wants, but she may nonetheless be forced to fight it. If that day should come, the world should understand this. There is absolutely no moral equivalency between Israel, a peace-loving, vibrant democracy and innovative economy with so much to offer the world, and Hezbollah, a terrorist organization that spews hate, trains martyrs, holds the Lebanese state hostage, and receives support and direction from the Iranian regime. There is no moral equivalency. We know that Israel would prefer to keep the sword of freedom sheathed. But if she is forced to take on this fight, we know where the United States will stand. We will stand on the side of our one true democratic ally in the Middle East, the State of Israel. These growing threats demand that we do everything we can now to push back against Iran's continued aggression. I have spent the better part of my more than 2.5 decades in Congress working to support strategic, diplomatic, multilateral efforts to confront Iran. That's why last year I worked with a bipartisan group of my colleagues to author and pass the Countering America's Adversary Through Sanctions Act, also known as CAATSA. At a time when bipartisanship division is too often the norm in Washington, Democrats and Republicans in the Senate voted by a margin of 98-2 to give the administration more tools to sanction Iran for its nefarious behaviors. That's a strong bipartisan vote. And I know that our success in large part is because of the AIPAC members in this room. Yet despite the bipartisan clarion call for action by Congress, the administration has yet to fully use the tools we provided, nor have they developed and implemented a comprehensive strategy as called for in the law for confronting Iranian aggression. So I hope together we can send a loud, clear, unified message to the White House: impose the CAATSA sanctions, use the tools Congress gave you, and do it without delay. Now, speaking of Iran and sanctions, let's turn to the nuclear accord. Everyone here knows where I stood on the Iran nuclear agreement. I had serious doubts about gifting the regime with sanctions relief in exchange for short-term limits on its nuclear program. And those concerns are ever more true to me today as they were then. For now, Iran is complying with the limited terms of the deal. But no one should be surprised that the JCPOA did not suddenly transform Iran into a responsible member of the international community. The recent protests in Iran have reminded us that this regime continues to put funding for terrorist proxies ahead of the well-being of its own people. That's why I believe, at this moment, it is essential that the United States immediately develop a comprehensive, coherent strategy to address Iran's destabilizing behavior, including its non-nuclear asymmetrical activities, while simultaneously working to address our long-term concerns about its nuclear program. If used correctly, this administration has potentially created leverage to address the concerns we all share about Iran. But I fear the lack of a comprehensive, coherent strategy ultimately leaves the United States with less leverage to work productively with our allies. We spent decades pursuing tough diplomacy and sanctions to bring our international partners together to address Iran's threats. And we must continue engaging the international community in a meaningful conversation about Iran's long-term nuclear capacity in the years ahead after many JCPOA limitations expire. And in Congress, we must push the administration to pursue effective diplomacy to hold Iran accountable each time it violates UN security resolutions and tests another missile or delivers another weapon into the hands of Houthi fighters in Yemen. That's why, along with Senator Corker, I am leading a letter to Secretary Tillerson in support of these diplomatic efforts. The United States has leverage right now, and I want the administration to use it. Iran must understand that the United States and our partners will not tolerate a nuclear-armed Iran, not now, not ever. We haven't forgotten Iran's nuclear history. The regime has lied about its nuclear ambitions before. That is why we must remain vigilant, we must be prepared, and we must make our expectations abundantly clear. Now, I know that many of you share my concerns about what comes after the JCPOA. Our European partners and the other parties to the deal have said that they agree there needs to be a successor agreement. And I welcome the administration initiating these talks on a diplomatic track. This challenge reminds us that fighting for Israel starts long before the battlefield. It means fighting in the halls of the United Nations and in the capitals of Europe, and sometimes within one's own party to do what is right. If we want to hold Iran accountable each time it violates UN security resolutions by testing missiles or delivering weapons to Hezbollah, we need a fully funded, skilled, and experienced diplomatic corps to get the job done. That's why I reject the administration's efforts to recklessly slash funding for the State Department and the U.S. Agency for International Development. How else can we expect to combat biased, one-sided, and hateful acts of the United Nations that not only unfairly target Israel, but seek to delegitimize the ties of the Jewish people to their ancestral homeland? It's disgraceful to see organizations and missions of the United Nations fail to take action on war crimes in Syria and the gross human rights violations of the Iranian regime or the Venezuelan regime or the Cuban regime, but always find time to condemn and target and isolate Israel. Of course, these insidious efforts to isolate Israel from the global community extend far beyond the United Nations. Now, I dream of the day when we will not have to fight these fights. I pray for the day when we will not have to fight boycott, divestment, and sanction policies by governments and businesses, or at the United Nations, or here at home on college campuses. So to the 3,600 students attending the AIPAC Policy Conference, you are the front line standing up for Israel on those college campuses, and we applaud you. We know that you face a rising tide of grossly misguided voices on your campuses and among your peers. I have never shied away from calling the BDS movement for exactly what it is: a thinly veiled, anti-Semitic, politically motivated, discriminatory, and reminiscent of a history we spent over half a century working to ensure is never repeated again. So mark my words, at every forum where I have a voice and a vote, I will ensure that the letters BDS are told exactly for what they are: bias directed solely at one people and one country by those who should know better. It's up to all of us. It's up to all of us to stand up, to stand together, speak out against anti-Semitic hatred and bigotry in all of its forms. And that includes right here at home. Last year, the United States saw the number of anti-Semitic incidents increase by 57%. Even in my home state of New Jersey, we saw anti-Semitic incidents rose by nearly a third in 2017. That's right, even in New Jersey, the Anti-Defamation League reported that there were more than 200 anti-Semitic incidents in the Garden State, up 30%, including bomb threats against Jewish institutions and assaults and vandalism. This is 2018. This is horrifying. We've seen anti-Semitism creep into political discourse across the world, on display in squares and streets we could never have imagined we would find it again. Last month, we watched with horror as Poland passed a law criminalizing the act of acknowledging that Poles had a role in collaborating with the German Third Reich. This is a gross attempt to rewrite history, one that risks denying the past, the suffering of millions, and stoking anti-Semitic hatred. That's why, in advance of International Holocaust Remembrance Day, my Republican colleague, Senator Marco Rubio, and I sent a letter to the President urging him to publicly memorialize the 6 million Jews brutally murdered in the Holocaust, to forcefully and unequivocally condemn anti-Semitism in all its forms, and to nominate an appropriately qualified person to serve as the State Department's special envoy to combat anti-Semitism throughout the world. With hatred and bigotry on the rise worldwide, with refugee numbers not seen since World War II, with actual Nazis running for Congress in Illinois, it is hard not to hearken back to the darkest period of the last century. Indeed, the Holocaust is a lasting reminder of the perils faced by the Jewish people in exile, a reminder of the miracle of the reestablishment of the modern state of Israel. But it is a political reality backed by thousands of years dating to the time of Abraham and Sarah. And so it is a written history by the courage of pioneers who turned the desert sands green, the war-weary and oppressed who returned to their ancestral home with nothing but a dream and their collective historical memories. A dream the people of Israel have realized today with a vibrant democracy and the rise of Israeli institutions that continue to win Nobel Prizes, save lives, shape the world with game-changing innovations in healthcare, in agriculture, technology, and so much more. Both the United States and Israel are nations built by dreamers and immigrants, by innovators and inventors, by peace-loving people who seek to build a brighter world. That is why we are not bound together just by mutual security interests, but also by shared values that transcend partisan divides and outlast the daily grind of American politics. Too often, as I travel the country, I hear concerns that support for Israel is no longer a bipartisan cause. I hear people citing recent opinion polling. But I encourage you to dig deeper. No recent surveys have presented a binary question of whether or not one supports Israel. And while political opinions sway over time, there is continuing overwhelming bipartisan support for Israel in the United States Congress. You saw that overwhelming bipartisan support in the passage of CATSA by a margin of 98-2. We don't often get 98-2 votes in the United States Congress. You saw that bipartisan support in the introduction of the Anti-Israel Boycott Act, legislation that will confront the misguided and bigoted BDS movement. You saw it in a bipartisan letter urging Israel's inclusion into the Global Entry Program signed by all 100 members of the United States Senate. You saw it when the House of Representatives passed the Taylor Force Act, which says no to funding the Palestinian Authority's continued incitement of violence and financial support for convicted terrorists, an effort I urge the Senate to take up in short order. And you saw that bipartisan support in the historic $38 billion Memorandum of Understanding we fought to secure in 2016, an agreement that ensures Israel's defenses remain unmatched in the region, and that the United States and Israel continue developing defense technologies of outstanding sophistication, like Iron Dome, David Sling, and the Arrow 3 missile defense systems. These technologies have not only saved the lives of Israeli civilians threatened by Hamas rockets, they have enhanced the security of America's own forces. And above all, we remain united in our support for a two-state solution with Israel's capital in Jerusalem, which will ultimately be the best guarantor for a secure, peaceful, and democratic Jewish state. I won't deny that in times like these, with anti-Semitism on the rise, with Iran emboldened, with instability surrounding Israel at every turn, the path to a Jewish democratic state of Israel, secure at home and at peace with its neighbors, may seem elusive, at times maybe even impossible. we must in these trying times cling to the values and hopes that have always driven our two countries. That justice will prevail over evil, that truth will triumph over bigotry, that we can unite in common cause in advance of democracy, of human dignity, of peace. That as Theodore Herzl said, if you will it, it is no dream. And nearly 70 years later, his words ring true. The will that drove those first pioneers to the desert, who turned sand into thriving fields, who translated their dreams into a modern-day Israel that recalls the past while embracing the future, these are the values we cling to today. As we prepare to celebrate Israel's 70th anniversary, it is you who have kept the shared values, hopes, and dreams of the American and Israeli people forever aligned. And I am proud to stand with you, knowing full well that no matter what challenges come our way, we will stand strong. We will not shrink in the face of growing threats against our cherished ally. We will not be silent in the face of rising tide of anti-Semitism here at home or abroad. And we will not be deterred by those who try to drive a partisan wedge between us. We will stand united against those foreign adversaries who seek the destruction of Israel. And together, we will show the world that the United States stands by the right of the Israeli people to live peacefully and securely in their homeland. David Ben-Gurion, the first Prime Minister of Israel, once said that in Israel, in order to be a realist, you must believe in miracles. Well, my friends, I believe in miracles, and I believe in the state of Israel. Thank you and shalom.
Please welcome Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell.
Good morning. Good to be back again. Speaking at AIPAC is a real honor. I've had the privilege of addressing this audience and my fellow friends of Israel on multiple occasions, and I must say it's great to be back one more time. I want to add my congratulations to Dr. Mort Friedman as he begins what I am sure will be a distinguished tenure as president of this extraordinary organization. I also want to thank Lillian Pincus for her years of service, along with Howard Core, Bob Cohen, and all those friends who make AIPAC's important work possible. When I was here last March, the U.S.-Israel relationship had reached an important turning point. For 8 years, America had drawn down our forces, altered our purpose, and the consequences had become quite clear. And as our forces and forward presence were diminished, complex and lethal threats emerged. The civil war within Syria devolved into an epicenter of regional conflict. A split within al-Qaeda in Iraq spawned the terrorist army we know as ISIL. The intervention by Iran in support of Bashar al-Assad brought Hezbollah and Shia militias right to Israel's doorstep. Iran's regional ambitions were bolstered by a fatally flawed nuclear deal which gave international legitimacy to Iran's uranium enrichment program. Iran gained sanctions relief and worked aggressively to spread its influence through malign behavior and expansionism. Supreme Leader Khamenei's regime had become an even more menacing shadow behind destabilizing forces in Lebanon, Bahrain, Iraq, Saudi Arabia, and Yemen. The Obama administration's fealty to the nuclear deal spawned a reluctance to address Iran's regional ambitions. The notion that Sunni powers in the Middle East needed to learn to share the neighborhood with Iran created a void. And Iran was happy to exploit that void, menacing our ships and planes deployed to the Persian Gulf. All those failures stemmed from a central misunderstanding. For 8 years, the previous administration failed to lead as an ally. It failed to recognize that the U.S. and Israel are stronger together and that we share a commonality of interests. It's more than just national friendship and shared history. Yes, America was proudly the first country to recognize Israel's Jewish government in 1948. Yes, in 1985, America's first ever free trade agreement was signed with none other than Israel. But it's also just a reality of our world. Israel is safer because of America's presence in the Middle East. And America's interests benefit when Israel stands as a partner in pursuit of common interest in this troubled region. Fortunately, in the last year, a new administration and a united front in Congress have charted a new course. America is rebuilding our capabilities, our partnerships, and our will to do what the circumstances would require. Many of our regional partners are focused on Iran's aggressive policies and seeking America's support. But make no mistake, Israel will have the firm support of the United States diplomatically and militarily as befits this historic partnership. Though the campaign to defeat ISIL is not over, this administration accelerated it. It began a genuine effort to rebuild America's armed forces, and Congress answered the call by ending the harmful spending caps that had forced our service members to do more with less. Secretary Mattis and our military leaders will once again have more resources to meet the myriad missions our nation puts before them. Our counterterrorism cooperation has been exemplary. And of course, the United States has finally taken a long overdue step and recognized that Israel's true capital is Jerusalem. Jerusalem is Israel's capital, plain and simple. Jerusalem is where the United States Embassy belongs and where it will stay. And in just a few months, for the first time ever, that's exactly where it will be. The challenges that Israel and America face today are the challenges we must face together with deep friendship and shared resolve. Israel lives in a neighborhood which includes a profoundly broken Syria, a dangerous Iran, the threat of ISIL in the Sinai, and an emboldened Hezbollah. But today, tomorrow, and always, Israel's beacon of democracy will continue to shine through the darkness. And America will be right there, standing proudly alongside our friends. Thank you for your passion. Thank you for your advocacy. Thank you for not letting anyone forget the necessity of this time-tested partnership. Thank you very much, everyone.
For 2,700 years, we lived in Iran, Jews as minorities, before Islam and after Islam. Keeping Jewishness, keeping our tradition, believing and staying as a Jew is the most important thing for us.
Growing up in this household, I was raised with stories about the Iranian Jewish community, the plight of the community, and the stories leaving Iran after the Islamic Revolution and resettling in Los Angeles, and the role that my grandfather played in helping a lot of Iranians coming to the United States.
The end of Iran's monarchy came early today when Khomeini's followers took control of the palace of the Shah.
My office was in the center of town where I was watching all the demonstrations. I listened to the radio and said at 11 o'clock today, there were these demonstrations in this city, that city, that city, about 10 different cities. And this is not accidental.
He said the new Iranian Islamic Republic would be inspired by the stern religious principles of Islam, nothing else.
That's why we felt the need and the necessity to take our families out. After the revolution, there was a lot of Iranian Jews arriving here. We were lost. A lot of people didn't speak the language. They didn't have the education to adjust themselves. So that's when the Iranian-American Jewish Federation came to existence. From there on, I was involved. At that time, but Carter was very, very angry with the Iranian government because of the hostages. We were afraid that we will be deported. We went there, I think we were about 10 of us, and we visited him about giving us a protection as minority Iranian Jews. And he agreed to that. And I was happy to have a chance to be of service to my community.
My grandfather's working with the administration to ensure that the American Iranian Jewish community was safe reminds me of the power of our community leaders. And so when I got to campus, I knew that I needed to be a strong voice for my community. When I got to UCLA, I saw that there was a very contentious campus climate surrounding Israel. I saw that we were dealing with issues of anti-Semitism on campus, and we saw anti-Israel rhetoric. So I knew that I wanted to play my part in combating these negative trends. At UCLA, we have a group called AIPAC, the Bruins for Israel Public Affairs Committee, and our group is hoping to strengthen the U.S.-Israel alliance and UCLA's relationship with Israel through political activism both on campus and in Congress. Today, we're lucky to be joined by two members of Congress who work closely with students in their districts. A lot of that work draws from the same themes as my grandfather's work when he was doing his advocacy, protecting the needs of your community, ensuring the well-being of your people, making sure that our rights are defended and that our tradition is guaranteed for generations to come. These are the values that inspire us. These are the things that motivate us.
We need to support young people in their activism. And I do hope that he will continue what he's doing. And God's blessing, maybe his son will do the same. Who knows?
Ladies and gentlemen, AIPAC campus activist Amir Kashfi. Please welcome AIPAC Board Chair Lillian Pincus.
It is my honor this morning to welcome our two distinguished guests. First, ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Mrs. Sarah Netanyahu. And now, It is my distinct honor to introduce the Prime Minister of the State of Israel. We have had the privilege of hosting the Prime Minister at our conference here in Washington many times over the years. In fact, 30 years ago, he addressed the 1988 AIPAC Policy Conference at the Sheraton Hotel just down the street. Back then, we were only a few hundred proud activists. But today, Mr. Prime Minister, we are thousands and thousands of pro-Israel activists from every state in our union. We are Democrats and we are Republicans. We are Jews and non-Jews, Americans from all 50 states and from all walks of life. And together, this morning, we wish to send one unified message. AIPAC remains committed to strengthening the U.S.-Israel relationship. We are as determined as ever to ensure the alliance between the United States and Israel endures today, tomorrow, and for many generations to come. So, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome back to the AIPAC stage the Prime Minister of the State of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu.
Thank you. Thank you. Good morning, AIPAC. It's always great to be here. But as I told President Trump yesterday, it's especially great to be in America's capital now that he has recognized Jerusalem as Israel's capital. Thank you, President Trump, for that historic decision. Thank you for announcing another decision to move the American embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem this Independence Day. And the first ambassador to have the honor of working from that embassy in Jerusalem is a great American ambassador, David Friedman. David, thank you for that terrific job that you're doing. And you know who else is doing a terrific job? Israel's ambassador to Washington, Ron Dermer. Stand up, Ron. Thank you for the terrific job you're doing. I want to thank Mort Friedman, Lillian Pincus. Lillian, you don't have to remind them how far back we go together. Howard Core, AIPAC's nuclear core. Everyone at AIPAC, I want to thank all of you for the work you're doing to strengthen the remarkable alliance between our two countries. Thank you. I want to acknowledge the Israeli ministers, Israel's representatives here in the United States and the United Nations, the mayor of Jerusalem, the many members of Congress, and the former leaders of countries who are here. In particular, I want to acknowledge my friend, a great champion of Israel, the former Prime Minister of Canada, Stephen Harper. Stephen, stand up, please. Stephen, we never forget our friends, and you were a tremendous friend, and still are. And finally, I want to thank the 4,000 students who are here with us today. "4,000 students. Thank you for cutting class to be here." So if any of you needs a note, you can see me later. There's a line forming outside. Now, what I can see is this. Well, it's dark, but I can see something. I can see that the audience in this hall each year is getting bigger and bigger and bigger. 18,000 strong. I want to see all of you, and I can't. I don't want to stand behind this podium. Is it okay? What the heck? I'm the Prime Minister. Thank you. Right. Yeah. Great. Good to see you. Thank you. I'll get there too, don't worry. Great to see you. Thank you. So today, I want to ask you, you remember that great Clint Eastwood movie, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly? Well, I want to talk about the good, the bad, and the beautiful. The good are all the good things that we are doing in Israel that are helping make the world a better place. The bad are all the bad things that malevolent forces are trying to do to Israel and to the world. And specifically, I'm talking about Iran. And the beautiful, well, that I'll leave to the last. So first, the good news. Israel has never been stronger militarily. Tremendously strong. That's an F-35 fighter plane, the most advanced in the world. That's an Iron Dome interceptor and many other systems that we developed with the help of America. Thank you, America. Thank you, successive American presidents. Thank you, Congress, Republicans and Democrats alike. Thank you, AIPAC, for helping bring this about. You're terrific. And this incredible military is buttressed by superb intelligence, unmatched in the world. Can you see me? I can hardly see you. I have to get closer. Yeah, I see you. That's good. Superb intelligence. You know, in the last few years, Israel's incredible intelligence services have foiled dozens of major terrorist attacks across the world in dozens of countries. That plane, a plane like that, could have been blown out of the sky if it weren't for Israeli intelligence. A plane heading from Australia to the Persian Gulf. You're boarding planes when you leave this place. You are safer because of Israeli intelligence. It not only protects Israeli lives, it protects innocent lives around the world. And we're able to do all this because of the extraordinary soldiers of the Israel Defense Forces, men and women. Just look at them. Men and women, black and white, religious and secular, gay and straight, Jews, Muslims, Christians, Druze, Circassians. They come from different backgrounds, but they're united with a common mission to protect the state of Israel. They keep us safe. They make us proud. Thank you. Now I know there are quite a few veterans of the Israeli army here, so I want you to stand up. I want you to be recognized. Stand up. Stand up. But the good news doesn't stop merely with Israel's strong military. It continues with Israel's strong economy. It's a tremendously strong economy. And I'll tell you, we made it stronger by moving Israel to free market principles, which unleashed the spark of genius embedded in our people into innovation, entrepreneurship. And there's a revolution taking place. This couldn't happen at the better time. Look at the 10 leading companies in 2006. 5 energy companies, one IT company, Microsoft. And a mere 10 years later, 2016, a blink of an eye in historical terms, it's completely reversed. 5 IT companies, 1 energy company left. The true wealth is in innovation. You know these companies, Apple, Google, Microsoft, Amazon, Facebook. Guess what? They all have research centers in Israel. All of them. Major research centers. And they're not alone. There are hundreds more. And there's a reason. Something is going on. It's a great change. It's, you want to hear jargon? It's one sentence. This is a terrible sentence, but I have no other way to say it. It's the confluence of big data, connectivity, and artificial intelligence. Okay? Did you get that? You know what that does? It revolutionizes old industries and it creates entirely new industries. So here's an old industry that Israel was always great in, agriculture. We're always good in agriculture. But now we have precision agriculture. You know what that is? See that drone in the sky? He's connected to a big database. And there are sensors in the field. And in the field, there's drip irrigation and drip fertilization. And now we can target, with this technology, the water that we give, the fertilizer that we give, down to the individual plant that needs it. That's precision agriculture. That's Israel. Unbelievable. You know, we were always good in water. I want you to see how good we are. So we recycle almost 90% of our wastewater. The next country with less than 20% is Spain. You can see how Israel, what it does for water, what it does for the environment. So when you take these two things, agriculture and water, and the other technologies that we apply in both, we can change the world. We are. We are. I just heard about an African woman in Africa has to walk 8 hours a day to give water to her children. 4 hours one way to a well, 4 hours back. And a young Israeli company brought in this technology that improves on Moses. Remember Moses? He brought water from a rock. They bring water from thin air. They bring water to Africa, to millions of people in Africa. Israeli technology. And I was just recently in India. That's my friend, Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Great friend. I'm showing him cherry tomatoes. This is in Gujarat, India. This is Israeli technology. And what I heard there was fantastic. Farmers came from the region. There's an experimental farm there and a place where Israel gives technology know-how to Indian farmers. 65% of India's population are farmers. And one farmer after the other gets up and says, because of Israeli technology, I've increased my crop yields and my income 3 times, 4 times, 5 times. Israel is changing the world in India, in Asia, in Africa, in Latin America, everywhere. These are the old industries. Now they're new industries. Israel is literally, how can I say this? Israel is literally driving the world. I'm talking about autonomous vehicles. Israel is a world leader in autonomous vehicles. 500 tech companies that sprang out almost instantaneously. And one of them, Mobileye, up there on the left, was just sold to Intel for the paltry sum of $15 billion. But the interesting thing is that Intel said to them, here are the keys to our 30 worldwide autonomous vehicle businesses. You run it. Israeli technology is driving the world. And one last industry, there are many more, but one more that you're all familiar with. You have bank accounts? You should. Okay. Well, you don't want anyone hacking into them, right? Or into your cars, or into the planes you ride. You need cyber security. Everybody needs cyber. Israel has become a world leader in cyber security. Look at how much they invest in the hundreds of Israeli startup companies, tremendous companies. But here's another factor that you should know. Israel's population is how much? Who knows? Class? 8 million. It's closer to 9, but it's about between 8 and 9 million, that's correct. And what percentage of that is of the world's population? Oh, come on. It's 1/10 of 1%. So what percentage do we get of the world global investment in cybersecurity, in private investment in cybersecurity? We're 1/10 of 1% of the world's population, and we get a whopping 20% of global private investment in cyber. We're punching 200 times above our weight. Not 2 times, not 10 times, not 100 times, 200 times above our weight. That's one heck of a punch. Very strong. Now here's how the dots connect. Because we have this tremendous capacity for security and intelligence, and because we have this tremendous capacity for civilian technology, for making the lives of people richer, safer, more productive, many countries are coming to Israel because they want to share with us these benefits. And that creates the third great change, which is a flourishing of Israel's diplomatic relations around the world. You know, when I joined the Foreign Service 105 years ago, as the DCM to this city, Washington, the number 2 in our embassy, I think we had about 80 or 90 countries with whom we had diplomatic relations. Now the number is 160, and there are very few countries left. By the way, what are we doing with Greenland? We got to do something with Greenland. Where's my advanced team? Go to Greenland. They must have some satellite needs or something that we could do there. But we are coloring the world blue. I've been to Africa 3 times in 18 months. I've been to South America, Latin America. Can you imagine? In the 70 years of history of Israel, a prime minister of Israel never went south of Texas? I mean, I love Texas, but yeah, I do. But we went to Argentina. We went to Argentina, to Colombia, to Mexico, and they say, come back, we want more. That is changing. All these countries are coming to us. India, China, Mongolia, Kazakhstan, all of them Azerbaijan, Muslim countries. First time I visited Australia, tremendous. It's far away though. So we're coloring the world blue. And you know what? The numbers, you remember people talked about Israel's isolation? Remember that? Israel's isolation? Pretty soon, the countries that don't have relations with us, they're going to be isolated. There are those who talk about boycotting Israel. We'll boycott them. So, the good news is very good, and it's getting better. The bad news, and that's the bad news, is that bad things are getting worse, and they're very bad. And when I talk about that, we have to deal with this challenge. And I'm thinking specifically, what do we do about Iran? The force behind so much of what is bad is this radical tyranny in Tehran. If I have a message for you today, it's a very simple one. We must stop Iran. We will stop Iran. When I last spoke here, I tried to warn the world about a nuclear deal that was a threat to the survival of Israel, the security of the region, the peace of the world. I warned that Iran's regime had repeatedly lied to the international community, that it could not be trusted. I warned that the deal gives Iran a clear path towards developing a nuclear arsenal in little more than a decade. And I warned that by removing Iran's sanctions, Iran's regime would not become more moderate and peaceful, but more extreme and belligerent, much more dangerous. And ladies and gentlemen, that's exactly what has happened. Here is what Iran is doing today. Can you enlarge that? No? Can you see that? Yeah, okay. Well, darkness is descending on our region. Iran is building an aggressive empire. Iran, Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Gaza, Yemen, more to come. Now Iran is seeking to build permanent military bases in Syria, seeking to create a land bridge from Tartus, from Tehran to Tartus on the Mediterranean, and in addition to moving its army, its air force, its navy to Syria to be able to attack Israel from closer hand, it's also seeking to develop, to build precision-guided missile factories in Syria, in Lebanon, against Israel. I will not let that happen. We will not let that happen. We must stop Iran. We will stop Iran. Last week we read in the book of Esther about an earlier Persian attempt to exterminate our people. They failed then, they'll fail now. We will never let Iran develop nuclear weapons. Not now, not in 10 years, not ever. President Trump has made it clear that his administration will not accept Iran's aggression in the region. He has made clear that he too will never accept a nuclear-armed Iran. That is the right policy. I salute President Trump on this. And the president has also made it clear that if the fatal flaws of the nuclear deal are not fixed, he will walk away from the deal and restore sanctions. Israel will be right there by America's side, and let me tell you, so will other countries in the region. As we counter Iran's aggression, we should always remember the brave people of Iran, their suffering, their hopes, their courage. Women are jailed for removing their hijabs. Students are tortured and shot for advocating freedom. We stand with those in Iran who stand for freedom. Now, I believe that a day will come when this horrible tyranny will disappear, will perish from the earth, and at that point, the historic friendship between the people of Israel and the people of Persia will be reestablished. Today we have Haman, Haman. Tomorrow we'll have Cyrus. And friendship and peace. My friends, as we work together to confront the bad, there's also potential to advance the good that paradoxically comes from the bad. Because most of the states in our region know, they know very well, believe me, that Israel is not their enemy, but their indispensable ally in confronting our common challenges and seizing our common opportunities. This is true for Egypt and Jordan, Israel's longtime peace partners, but it's also true for many other Arab countries in the Middle East. Israel remains committed to achieving peace with all our neighbors, including the Palestinians. President Trump has made it clear that he is committed to peace. I have made it clear that I'm committed to peace. We appreciate the efforts of President Trump's superb team, Jared Kushner, Jason Greenblatt, and Ambassador David Friedman. Thank you all. Thank you all for your hard work for peace. But to get peace, President Abbas has to embrace peace and to stop supporting terror. Raise your hands high if you agree with me that President Abbas should stop paying terrorists who murder Jews. You know how much he pays? He pays about $350 million a year to terrorists and their families each year. That's about a little less than 10% of the total Palestinian budget. That's an incredible number. He pays Hakim Awad. Hakim Awad is the terrorist who murdered this beautiful family of Ehud and Ruth Fogel and their 3 children, including a 3-month-old baby girl, Hadass. So he pays Hakim Hadass, this murderer, and over the lifetime of this killer, he will be receiving $2 million. I have a message for President Abbas. Stop paying terrorists. Because what message does this send to Palestinian children? It says, murder Jews and get rich. And I believe President Abbas should find better use for this money to build roads, schools, hospitals, factories. Build life. Don't pay death. Invest in life. Invest in peace. Israel hopes that the passage of the Taylor Force Act will make clear to President Abbas that America has zero tolerance for terror. Ladies and gentlemen, I've spoken about the good and the bad. There's plenty of both. But I want to end with a few words about the beautiful. Oh, that's very kind of you. That's very kind of you. I love you too. Thank you. Who planted her? I'm talking about the beautiful alliance between Israel and the United States of America. I'm talking about the beautiful alliance that has brought all of you here to Washington, the beautiful alliance that you work day in and day out to make stronger and to make better. What is this beautiful alliance made of? It's made of our shared values. That's the wellspring of the great alliance between our two countries. And all you have to do is leave this room, leave this hall, and you walk around a few blocks from here, and you see these majestic monuments. You can learn from them all about our common values. You know, they come from a certain book, a great book, a good book. It's called the Bible. It said that all of us are created in the image of God. And those words inspired Jefferson when he declared in the Declaration of Independence that all men are created equal, all women too, by the way. And that book inspired Abraham Lincoln in the darkest days of America's Civil War. He found inspiration in the words of our greatest king, King David, when he said that the wounds of a divided America would heal, and the judgments of the Lord are true and righteous. Just as the stirring words of the prophet Amos inspired the great Martin Luther King when he stood before the Lincoln Memorial and promised to carry on his struggle until justice runs down like water and righteousness like a mighty stream. These values are an inseparable part of America's story. They're an inseparable part of Israel's story. And today, together, we are writing a new chapter in our common story, a story of freedom, of justice, of peace, of hope. And it is because we're inspired by the same ideas, because we're animated by the same values, that America and Israel have forged an internal bond that can never, ever be broken. Thank you, AIPAC. God bless Israel, God bless America, and God bless the Israel-America alliance. Thank you all. Thank you.